This week on Quality Digest Live, we consider the rise and fall of life sciences company Theranos.
Plus, 4 steps to prepare for a measurement systems audit. That and more when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for May 6, 2016. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
Yes, you are. And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, Siemens and Local Motors, that's a technology company that designs, builds, and sells vehicles, have formed a new partnership which is intended to help advance the future of manufacturing by optimizing the development and large-scale 3D printing of automobiles. If you were at the last IMTS back in 2014, you might recognize Local Motors as the company, along with Cincinnati Inc. and Oak Ridge National Laboratories, that 3D printed an entire car. The Stratti,
there it is,
shown at the show, and there it is right there. I believe they printed that car in 44 hours, or at least I believe that was the goal that they were setting for it. When they say they 3D printed the car, basically they mean most of the body and some of the interior and so forth. Obviously, they didn't 3D print the electric motor or the wheels or anything else.
Right.
But it was pretty interesting just the same if you were there. So by expanding its use of Siemens digital enterprise software suite, Local Motors and its community of co-creators, that's what they call them, can leverage something called digital twins to increase the productivity and quality in product design and direct digital manufacturing, DDM. The DDM process, which takes advantage of additive manufacturing technologies, including 3D printing, produces parts directly from 3D models, and it helps eliminate the need for tooling, removes the time lag between design and production, and simplifies redesign. This is all of the stuff that we're all familiar with 3D printing and additive manufacturing. Well, Siemens digital twin software technology links the design and production steps by enabling the creation of virtual models or twins, think of it that way, that accurately represent the form, function, and performance of a product and its production system. These high-fidelity digital twins enable engineers to test the functionality of the products and the manufacturing processes in a virtual world in order to predict and optimize performance in the physical world. Local Motors plans to open 3 new facilities this year. A lab space plus a showroom and demonstration facility is scheduled to open near Washington, D.C. in National Harbor, Maryland this summer. The National Harbor opening is slated to be followed by the debut of a lab facility in Berlin and a full-scale DDM microfactory in Knoxville, Tennessee later this year. The microfactory in Knoxville will also serve as the main Local Motors facility for the development and construction of 3D printed vehicles. Pretty cool stuff.
Pretty cool stuff. Yeah, I wonder, I'm sure we'll see something along these lines at IMTS in 2016. It's a similar type of a large-scale, long-term project.
I'm sure.
I don't know if it'll be a car.
Local Motors is pretty interesting. They've got this thing called co-creation, which basically just means that in the development of a vehicle, they can receive online input from, quote, co-creators to help in fine-tuning some of the designs, making design suggestions and so forth. And all these, and then the actual builds are done what they call microfactories, which are really just very small, just exactly what they sound like, very small vehicle factories where, because we're not talking large volume production. They have a few different products that Local Motors puts out. There's a kind of a motorcycle, there's an off-road vehicle. They're working, I think, developing a kind of a street vehicle right now. But these are kind of low volume things. But it's an interesting model that they have. If you're interested in looking at them, just look up Local Motors. Pretty good stuff. Yeah,
interesting stuff there as we continue to see the additive manufacturing 3D printing market continue to penetrate into other areas of manufacturing. It's a fascinating story that seems to change every week that we report on here on Quality Digest Live. All right, well, we turn now to an article. It's really, I think you can consider it more of a cautionary tale maybe, that we ran in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Titled The Rise and Fall of Theranos. It was written by Dr. Norman A. Paradis, and you can see it right there. Dr. Paradis is a professor of medicine at Dartmouth College, and he's got an interesting perspective on Theranos from his own experiences and his own expertise, which I think really came in handy as I read the story, and I'll get to that in a moment here. The piece now, it tells the story again of Theranos, and Theranos is a life sciences company that received lots and lots of attention a couple of years back for their claim that they could run dozens of diagnostic tests from a tiny amount of blood, even down to a few drops. Now, investors and media types flocked to the Theranos banner and gave them the kind of support and coverage that more established companies in the space hungered for, and as it turns out, that those companies probably deserved a lot more maybe than Theranos did as the story evolved. Well, it didn't hurt that the company's founder, Theranos' founder and CEO, Elizabeth Holmes, was and is young and attractive, charismatic, very high energy person. Theranos became renowned for a star-studded board of directors, most of which were personally courted by Holmes. The board included luminaries from government service, the military, and industry, including former Secretaries of State George Shultz and Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of Defense Bill Perry, former U.S. Senator Sam Nunn, and former CEO of the Bechtel Group, Riley Bechtel, among many others. Well, as you look at that list and you hear that list, one thing that jumps out about that board members, well,
these are all medical specialists.
I was going to say they all have deep roots in life sciences. Well, actually, no, none of them had any experience, any practical experience really in the life sciences field. According to Paradis's article, the company actually recently recalibrated its medical advisory board to include more experts in chemistry, pathology, and clinical chemistry. However, I think the lack of high-level experience behind the scenes on that board, on the first board I mentioned, their executive board, as Theranos was ramping up, might very well have played a big part in the failures to deliver on promises made, which really kind of became the hallmark of this Theranos narrative, that they made these claims that they could do things with these tiny amount of blood, all these different dozens of different tests they could do. Well, they really maybe weren't able to do that so far, maybe,
right,
yeah,
right.
As it turns out. Well, the narrative, again, it comes down to these scientific claims that may or may not be valid. Now, again, I want to get back to the author of this piece, Paradis. He has spent his whole career in this very field, and he writes in this article, Dr. Paradis, that he and other medical laboratory experts were kind of scratching their head over those claims when they were made, in which Theranos' wondrous, but rarely seen and never independently tested Edison device, that's what they called it, could do all these dozens of tests on, again, mere droplets of blood. And again, droplets of blood drawn not from a vein, but from the tip of a patient's finger. And the science itself is kind of dubious, and Paradis does a really nice job in this piece explaining why. For example, and I didn't know this, Dirk, you may have known this, I didn't, the blood collected from your finger does not really have the same properties as that blood which is taken from a vein. Molecules like proteins and lipids just aren't found in uniform concentrations throughout your body. So, for example, a droplet of blood from your finger just isn't likely to be able to properly detect levels of these types of molecules. So for some tests, it's fine, but for others, some of which Theranos claimed they could accurately measure, probably not really reliable to take blood from a finger.
According to Paradis.
According to Paradis, according to this article.
Right.
Now, again, this is science, and it's evolving science, so there's not clear understanding of it. But there certainly are doubts. There certainly are dubious understanding of these claims, whether or not these claims that Theranos made were true. Now, all that is central to the story, and you really should read Paradis's article and account for further detail and some great supporting links. A dozen, 15, 20 links in that article.
Yeah,
there's a lot of links.
Yeah, he links out to a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, and you can read that, and you can kind of do a lot of figuring that out. But ultimately, of course, this story to me was a story about investors and about how Theranos raised their money and what they did with it. Ultimately, of course, you have to, when you're going to be a startup and you're going to ask people for money, you have to be able to prove your claims. And this is something that anyone in the industry should consider carefully before you open your mouth, maybe, right? I mean, you want to raise money from people, you have to make sure you can do what you're going to be able to do. You want to, I think the statement that people make is you want to under-promise and over-deliver, as opposed to over-promising and under-delivering, which maybe, again, this is still an evolving thing.
Right.
I mean, and Theranos right now, this moment in time, looks like they're not able to deliver on their claims. Doesn't mean they won't be able to in the future, but right now it doesn't look good for them. If you think about it, I think that the tie-in for me on this was the active quality improvement really is about demonstrating, sustaining a certain level of performance. The words, "in God we trust, all others must bring data," I think they were true when Deming uttered them a few decades ago. They're true now, and they're likely going to be true in the future. Stories like this one from Theranos only underscore the need for all of us to be reminded of that when we're assessing claims made by companies, especially by companies for which we ourselves work. I think that that's another key takeaway here, is that there weren't, I think, enough dubiousness within Theranos maybe at the time to say, well, we're making all these claims, we're raising all this money. They raised $400 million from investors, right? They had a $9 billion market valuation. I mean, this was a big company that raised a lot of money, had a lot of support. So somebody somewhere should have said, well, can we prove this? Can we show it going forward? And there's been a lot of studies. Again, Paradis has a ton of links in there. There's been a lot of studies about how accurately they actually could do what they claimed, and there's some dubiousness as to whether or not even those claims are true or not, if they really were as much of a failure as they claim. But I think the takeaway for me is, you have to understand what your company's doing. You have to be able to, if you're going to go out to the market, you have to be able to prove what you're doing. And if you can't, you got to maybe dial it back a little bit. I think that's pretty valuable.
Honestly, in pretty much everything that you read on this story, the biggest problem is that Theranos has not been transparent about their technology. Now, they claim it's because they didn't want any peer review because they'd be afraid of giving away trade secrets, that sort of stuff, which may be true. But the problem is that you put a technology out there, you claim it works, and then particularly in the medical field, you don't allow any peer review of your process and of your claims. Then it's just completely open to scrutiny, and people can punch holes in it all they want, and you have no backup other than just say, well, just trust us. Well, trust only goes so far, particularly when there seem to be some tests going on that say, well, we're doing some independent testing and we're not sure we trust your process and that it works. And Theranos says, okay, well, in one case, Theranos said, okay, well, we're going to release our knowledge, let people take a look at it, and to date they haven't done it. That just all leaves kind of a bad taste in people's mouths, you
don't know where you stand. And if you're an investor, you can see, if you're a small investor, let's say, you'd say, well, I don't feel comfortable with these guys. We plowed money into it, and it hasn't returned any money, and now we're not even sure that the claims they made are actually going to be valid. That doesn't mean they absolutely are not, and the science won't eventually work itself out. But right now, it doesn't look good.
Okay, well, understanding measurement uncertainty is a key part of many standards, such as, let's say, ISO 17025. And, understanding all the inputs into your measurement system's accuracy, things like, the calibration of your equipment, how well trained your operators are, how reliable they are, operator variability, the environment. And all of that is important if you're going to keep your measurement system under control. And furthermore, since your measurement system also comes under scrutiny at audit time, you need to kind of make sure everything is well documented. So, what are some of the best practices you can follow to make sure your measurement system is prepared for an audit? Well, here to tell us is Eric Gasper of PQ Systems. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Hi, Dirk. Hi, Mike. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
Thanks for being here.
When it comes to an audit for something like, let's say, ISO IEC 17025 or ISO TS 16949, what is it that an auditor is concerned with as it regards the measurement system, a company's measurement system?
Well, that's a great question, but it's also a pretty challenging one just because of the kind of wide berth that some of these different standards are going to cover. The first thing is the ISO 17025, that is going to be mostly for calibration labs, the people that are the vendors that are doing some of the harder equipment. That's the type of standard that they're going to have to follow and adhere to. The TS 16949, that's going to be more related to the automotive industry. Both of these things are a little bit difficult in the sense that you have to do a lot of work, a lot of prep, but I think the biggest thing is just getting everything organized and also knowing that you need to keep everything well documented, as you kind of stated just a moment ago. So you can go a long way with organizational skills. There are people that still have paper systems to be able to keep track of all their measurement systems. Although there's a lot of commercially available software or companies that build their own software that can make things a lot easier during audit time.
So Eric, let me ask you this. What do you think are the most common mistakes or shortcomings when it comes to measurement systems?
I feel the most common mistake that companies go through is a lack of organization and then also a lack of ownership. You have people that are thrust into positions. They used to be a technician on the line, and all of a sudden now they might be the quality person, the person that's supposed to be in charge of their gauges and tools and devices, and they don't really know all the ins and outs of these different standards that they're supposed to be adhering to. So the lack of ownership could be a big problem in organizations, and the disorganization. Not being able to find gauges. Gauges are lost or missing but aren't documented as such. And the worst case is actually using gauges that are overdue, and that could really all stem from those two things: lack of organization and not having a particular point person, an owner that is kind of carrying the system through all the way from start, finish, and really reviewing it periodically.
Do you think there's also, you mentioned that sometimes a person is kind of thrust into this position. When it comes to measurement systems and measurement system analysis and understanding how all these various pieces, the operators, calibration, the physical environment, how all those work together, do you think there is a sense in some cases where the person given responsibility for this just doesn't really understand how critical all these different pieces are?
I think that's a very accurate statement. I've talked to numerous kind of customers of ours where they're really good at the calibration side of it. They've been doing that for a long time. They understand the purpose and the point of it, but they're a little bit fuzzy on some of the MSA studies or doing an expanded uncertainty study. They know they have to do it because it meets a requirement, but they don't really understand what the point of it is, and that's really hard to get the most out of it. You're trying to do something that's telling you about your measurement system that you didn't already know. If you're just going through the motions and doing a study just to get it complete so you can check a box, you're not really taking advantage of the purpose of what some of those studies are. And in general, my last comment about that is it is pretty common that people get themselves into a position of expertise, and they're the person that's been here the longest, so we're going to rely on this particular resource, and they're going to hopefully be the ones that could know all about our measurement system. And that's really good, but at the same time, it puts a lot of pressure on somebody that doesn't really know all the ins and outs of a particular standard, and they can get themselves into some trouble.
Eric, if a company, in your opinion, if a company were to focus on doing just one thing to improve its measurement system, what would you say that would be?
I think the first thing to get started would be to really review and research the particular standard that company has to adhere to. It's very difficult to hit a target when you can't even see it. So many companies, what I would suggest is start by getting a copy of the TS 16949 or the ISO 17025 or the AS 9100. That's for aerospace. But really sit down, sit with your quality engineers, also talk with your actual owners of the company. If you get buy-in from them, that helps spread the ownership. Everybody can appreciate and understand what you're trying to accomplish and why it's good to get these certifications. But really review, look at them, and if you have questions, my best advice is to look abroad. Go online. There are numerous forums from different areas, different industries, where companies, people are all going through the same thing. So the question that you might have has probably already been addressed by a number of other different people going through the same experience. The other thing is there's lots of training and classes and different auditors that have been retired or are still active. They are a good resource too. They can give you some really good points on what you need to look for. And that's pretty much the first thing I would say. The number one goal, really understand, research, and know what you're supposed to be adhering to. Otherwise, it's might take a little bit of difficult timing to get through a particular audit.
How important is documentation throughout all of this, and what types of things are companies? What types of things do companies need to document in terms of their measurement system? And I'm assuming there's things like, your calibration, your calibration schedule and whether you've calibrated equipment at a particular time and it's up to date, that sort of thing. I mean, just in general, what types of documentation do you think auditors might be looking for?
Well, there's a statement that it's not what you can do, it's what you can prove you've done, and a lot of that goes from just well-maintained and accurate documentation. Probably one of the first things that an auditor might want to review or look at is take a particular gauge and show me the last so many calibrations and show me the calibration certificates that go with that. Now, from an outside vendor, somebody like a calibration house, they're going to send you a certificate that is going to be hopefully adhered to by the standards that are laid out in the ISO 17025, so things like a unique certificate number, the masters or standards that were used to be able to verify against. If there is NIST traceability, and certain auditors kind of look for that more than others. Also, uncertainty values need to be present on that documentation as well. So an auditor, when they're talking about the documentation, what they're looking for is it present? Is it easily reviewable? Can you find it? Do you have to dig for it? And is it associated with the correct gauges? Lost documentation could be a really big problem, and it's probably one of the things that is easily avoidable if you have come up with a great way to store these, whether they be paper or you're storing them electronically somewhere on a shared network.
Okay. Well, Eric Gasper, Project Manager for PQ Systems. Thanks for spending some time with us this morning. Now, Eric and I, I should say I'll be there, and Eric will be Eric will be doing all the talking, but I'll introduce him anyway, at a webinar next week called 4 Steps to an Audit-Proof Measurement System. That's going to be May 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And again, it'll be hosted by myself, but Eric Gasper will be there to share his knowledge on how to audit-proof your measurement system. So Eric, thanks again for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Okay, we'll talk to you next week.
You too. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Eric. We'll see you on Thursday. That's going to be a good webinar.
Yeah.
That's going to be good. You can get a little taste of it there. He knows what he's talking about, and certainly for all of you out there who need to make sure that your audit system, your measurement system is auditable.
Right.
That's a really good one for a lot of you out there, that a lot of things that you do out there. Definitely make sure you check out that webinar. Again, it's Thursday next week. You'll be getting some further email about that, so you can make sure you tune in. All right, well, our final article today is one that I'm going to cover here from Kevin Meyer. It's called A Break to Reflect and Unlearn, and that is by Kevin Meyer right there. It appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And Kevin Meyer, I think, is one of my favorite writers that we use here at Quality Digest Daily. He's, he lives lean, and a lot of people live lean, and he lives a lean life, but he lives it with a healthy dose of mindfulness and dare I say, Dirk, spirituality. I think I can say that. Yeah. Spirituality. I think I've never met Kevin, but reading his articles, many of his articles, I can tell it's infused with a sense of spirituality and a connectedness to between work and your home life and the mind, body, the whole thing. And I think that's really where it's coming from. In this piece, he raises an important perspective that he's touched on this before. It's the value of beginner's mind. Which is something that again, he's talked about, that we've heard about a few times. The concept, which is referred to as Shoshin in Japanese, is one of the core concepts of Zen. Beginner's mind is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's the ability to focus on, anything really, as if you've never seen or done or experienced it before. The problem here, the problem with not having things from a beginner's mind is that expertise tends to kind of lock one into doing things in a certain way because those ways have proven successful. It's a natural human tendency to want to do things that work. And I think that when you do that, you aren't open through a beginner's mind to other inputs, right? I mean, you're an expert. If you've done things a certain way and it's worked and you continue to do it, you're never going to really learn much, right? I mean, that makes some sense. And that's what he's saying here, is that the beginner's mind is a very beneficial thing if you can get away from your own expertise. Right. Not so easy, but if you can, it's very valuable. Well, of course, doing the same thing, even if it's working, tends to, again, kind of inhibit creativity and prevents you from finding even better ways of doing things. You've done it again the same way, and you kind of have carved that groove, and now you're not going to maybe look at something that's coming in from the outside and do it in a different way. Maybe it'll be a worse way, but maybe it'll be a better way as well. Many use Shoshin, again, beginner's mind, to improve their personal life. It's very much used in that way within the Zen teaching. But it's easy to see how this value really would apply very well to lean and to business as well. Many of the tools, for instance, of the Toyota production system, if you think about them, encompass this idea in a certain level. I mean, the Ono circle, right? Or Gemba walking, or 5S, or whatever it may be. They all apply beginner's mind to well-established processes. In other words, you have, in many cases, a manager who, has a certain level of experience and knowledge, one would think, and that person, though, has to maybe put that on the shelf. When they go into the Ono circle, the idea is that you just sit and you clear your mind and you observe. It's really meditative if you think about it. I mean, I've never been in an Ono circle, but I mean, reading about it, it seems like, okay, it's a very meditative process. You're not looking at things and saying, oh my gosh, I've seen that before, and why is he doing it that way? You're looking at it, you're saying, okay, that's being done. Okay, let me think about that. Let me think about it as a beginner. Why is that being done? Why is that over there? Why is that person standing in that way? Why is that person taking a break now? Whatever it is, you look at it with beginner's mind, it's a better way of doing it and being able to really see what's going on and maybe look at some improvement opportunities too. Gemba walking is the same way, right? 5S is the same way. You look at a thing and you say, well, gosh, why have we had the storage locker over there all this time, right? Maybe it needs to be over here.
Right.
But you never looked at it with a beginner's mind. It's always been that way. The idea we've always done it that way is the antithesis to the beginner's mind. Well, again, as you can see, I think from that little recap I just gave you there, beginner's mind isn't easy. I mean, successful performers are really trained in the value of repetition and practice and doing things in the same way until you get it right. I mean, this kind of ties in with Malcolm Gladwell's thing. We've all heard about the 10,000 hours. You've heard about this, right? Malcolm Gladwell famously wrote in a book a few years ago that, in order to achieve true expertise in something, you need to have 10,000 practice hours of it. Okay. Whether it's violin or piano or baseball or whatever it would be, you need 10,000 hours of focused intent to do it, to become an expert. Well, maybe this kind of turns that on its head a little bit. I mean, yes, maybe it's 10,000 hours to expertise, but maybe it's like 10 seconds to a beginner's mind. I mean, maybe you don't need all that. I mean, yes, certainly it helps, and you need experts. I mean, you're not going to throw experts out of your process, but maybe those experts themselves need to be trained to forget everything they know while they're looking at things. I mean, you want to obviously have the expertise to get into a boardroom and break it down, but to begin to look at it that way with beginner's mind, I think it's really, really valuable. It's really valuable in your life, and it's really valuable in your workspace. And I think that's what Kevin's saying here.
It's interesting. Not to toot our own horns, but I think editors actually practice at this, particularly if you edit your own work.
Yeah.
Is you learn early on that you have to be willing to go, okay, I'm going down this track. No, even though I've written 1,000 words, throw it out, start all over again. Right. Which is in a sense is the same thing. It's like, yes, I know I've already written this. Yes, I know I've already invested time to it. Yes, I already know that I've had this particular line of thinking, but I got to be honest with myself and go, I don't think this is working. Throw it away, start from word one and do it all over again. And the more you edit and the more you do that, you get actually used to it, where throwing away something that you've written is just like, okay, well, I'm throwing away something I've written. I'll keep that one little piece because it was good, and I'm going to start all over again. And I think beginner's mind is kind of the same idea. Is throw away all the preconceptions, throw away everything you think you already know or have already done, and just go, okay, I'm fresh. Let's do it again.
Right.
Let's take another approach. Let's come at it from another angle.
And it's not a waste. That's the other
it's
thing.
not a waste. No, you've learned something.
You've learned something. And the other thing is there's the deeper connection between in the writing and editing process and this idea of beginner's mind that you were talking about there. I mean, it's like, you know what you want to say when you're writing. You have in your mind the ideas that you're trying to communicate. And just like when you're an expert, you have an idea of how something's supposed to work, but for everybody else, maybe they don't see it that same way. So backing out of it and saying, okay, let me look at this as if I'm a 6-year-old and I don't know anything at all. Does this explain it? And you're like, no, my writing doesn't explain it. I know what I'm trying to say, but nobody else does.
And you have to be honest with it.
Yeah, and again, maybe there's one sentence like you say in there that does it say it, you use that and you build off of that. But it's hard to get into that space. It is very much a different mindset. I think for people that are in our audience, manufacturers in particular, I think that you fall into that reliance on expertise. We say, well, that guy's an expert, and actually Eric Gasper just said it too. It's that one person who knows the thing. You rely on that person. Well, that's great that person has that expertise, but you need other people too looking at it and saying, well, maybe we need to look at this differently too.
Yeah.
Beginner's Mind is pretty powerful stuff.
Yep.
I think.
Pretty
Definitely
cool.
good stuff there by Kevin Meyer.
All right, well now it's time for the tweet of the week.
That's right.
This one comes from Twitter user UKDK.
I think that's ukt.
Ukt. Okay. And the tweet is, happy, sad, angry? Microsoft now knows your emotions.
And more than that, they now know your emotionicons.
Yes. Well, you know what this is referring.
I do know.
Microsoft, in case you haven't seen it, Microsoft is doing like image analysis and looking at zooming in on like part of the face and looking at the wrinkles and the smile and everything else and trying to determine whether that's a happy face or a sad face or an angry face. It's only right about 40% of the time, but
Well, it's getting there though. I mean, I'm only right about 10% of the time when I try to read somebody's emotions, so that's okay. But
just ask my wife.
Yeah, please. Microsoft, I mean, they, many years ago, I was told by somebody who shall remain nameless that the government was watching me through my computer. And now I'm starting to think that she was right.
Yes.
Maybe.
Basically true.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks, Rick. And of course, always find us on Twitter at Quality Digest for other great tweets about stuff just like that. So check us out on Twitter at Quality Digest. All right. Well, that's our show for this week. We're going to leave you now, but we want to remind you, of course, before we go, that we're doing a webinar with PQ Systems next Thursday, May 12th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Dirk is going to be joined by Eric Gasper, who we just saw earlier on the show. Thank you, Eric, for joining us today. Come back and join those guys on Thursday. Keep an eye on your email, because we'll be sending you email reminders about that webinar. You can click on the link in that email and register for it now. It should be a good one. So check that out next Thursday. Again, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. So you guys all have a great weekend. Yep. We will see you next week for another great week of QDD, and we'll be right back here on Friday the 13th next week, with another QDL. So we'll see you then.
See you then.
Bye.
Four, three, two, one, fire.